Hi, everybody. Michelle Edmonds here from Idaho News 6, and today is Making the Grade, a chance for all of us to discuss what is happening in education across our great state. And as we always do on these Tuesday mornings, we welcome in Kevin Richert from Idaho Education News. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Michelle. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I haven't started back to school with my kids yet because they're at West Ada. So we get to find out tonight what's happening with the West Ada School District. But before we get into schools and back to school safely and higher education, all of those topics we want to discuss, I want to tell everybody that we would love to hear your comments, your thoughts, your feelings, especially if your children have started back to school in some form or fashion. We'd love to hear how it's going. So leave us a comment as Kevin and I are talking. We'll let you start typing away there, folks, while we discuss another major topic on the agenda for education and for our state before we jump into safely back to school. And that's the special legislative session that's going on right now, Kevin. If people saw the video and the pictures from yesterday, it was anything but calm at the State House. Can you explain, first of all, why this legislative special session is important when it comes to talking about education?
Well, the most important topic that pertains to education in all of this is the question of civil liability and whether the legislature should pass a bill that would extend some sort of civil liability protection to schools or other entities in the event of a coronavirus outbreak or a case of coronavirus. And that is a controversial topic. And there was some emotional testimony about that late Tuesday afternoon. That's late Monday afternoon. That's going to continue today. Just handicapping the prospects of one of those bills passing, one of those civil liability bills passing. I don't think there's a guarantee. I think there's considerable concern about the wording, the need for this legislation. So from a policy end, I think it's hard to predict how that's going to play out and what the outcome of the special session turns out to be. But really, the policy debate was overshadowed by what we saw at the State House on Monday, and I've not seen something like that before.
I think we might have the ability to pull up some pictures and some video. First and foremost, it was packed in the Lincoln Auditorium area and with observers watching in the House and Senate areas as well. The other thing you have to notice is not only no social distancing, but how few people were wearing masks. Was there a movement here against coronavirus in general, Kevin? What's your thought?
I think it's really kind of hard to pin down exactly what the concern is and what we saw expressed on Monday. And I think you get into trouble when you try to oversimplify and pigeonhole where everybody is coming from. But the bottom line of it is, this was a session or is a session that was designed to try to ensure some modicum of social distancing, to allow some modicum of safety and trying to head off the potential spread of coronavirus. And this session really, on that front, really came off the rails very quickly. It was alarming. It was disturbing. I do need to kind of hasten to add, I'm covering it from afar. I'm covering it from my office, a couple of blocks away from the State House. I was working on another story Monday. I was not there firsthand. What we saw, what our photographer Sammy Edge chronicled on Monday, what we've seen from the social media feeds and what we've seen from other news accounts, it was an alarming beginning to this special session. There's really no other way to describe it.
Let's go back to why this is important to educators and what school districts are going to be watching what comes out of this legislative session. And we should make note, Kevin, that only the governor can call for an extraordinary session, as these are called. And Governor Brad Little did that in a proclamation last week. He outlined the only issues that can be discussed during this special session. What are school districts looking for? What do they want to come out of this legislative session? What are they worried about? You were talking about liability. Talk a little bit more about that.
School administrators are worried that they're going to be sued if a case of coronavirus or an outbreak of coronavirus is linked to a school. And what they have heard from their insurance carriers is that the insurance carriers will not cover them in a case of coronavirus spread. So what the school administrators want, and then they're not alone, there are business groups seeking the same sort of protection. They want some sort of legislation that protects them, that shields them from a potential lawsuit in the event of a spread of coronavirus. But this is an issue that's dividing even the education community, because I think while school administrators want some form of civil liability protection, the teachers union, the Idaho Education Association, has come out against this legislation. So there's even disagreement within the education community. Not to mention the disagreement that I think we're going to see unfold and continue to unfold within the legislature.
The governor had talked about wanting this special session to happen so that legislation would pass. As you and I reported last week, Governor Brad Little was having meetings with the leadership to try and make sure that he wouldn't call back into a special session and then not see anything come out of it. Give me your gut level. This is day 2. Do we have any idea how long this special session will last? And Kevin, at this point, it certainly sounds like you're saying nothing is on or off the table.
Well, lots off the table, because really what's limited is discussion of the civil liability legislation and some election legislation. It looks like the Senate passed a couple of election bills unanimously on Monday. Those now go over to the House. I would suspect that the odds on those bills passing and getting to the governor's desk are pretty good. But what happens on the civil liability front is anybody's guess. And I think there's also really what you're starting to see is some tension between the legislature and the governor about the parameters of this special session. Now, as we speak here on Tuesday morning, the House is debating a bill that would, and it's not a bill, it's called a concurrent resolution, that would rescind the coronavirus emergency declaration that the governor ordered back on March 13th, back when the state was first starting to report coronavirus cases. And legislators who are pushing for this are saying that it's their prerogative to pass a resolution ending an emergency declaration like this, and they're flexing their muscle on that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, because as I say, even as we speak, the House is debating this. There's been some speculation on the House floor about whether the Senate is even going to take this up. So very much that too is up in the air. But what you're seeing is the legislature trying to push back and assert its authority. Some legislators really trying to push their authority as a branch of government. So you've got tension between the legislature and the governor. It's a little bit more procedural than the obvious tension and frustration that we saw manifest itself in the State House on Monday. But this is a very, there's definitely an undercurrent of frustration and anger that's defining this special session.
Kevin, I want to bring in Bella Sanderson's opinion here. She says it's not, quote, alarming when people show up, which is their right to be involved in government, most definitely. She says stop spreading lies. I don't know, Bella, if that's directed at Kevin and me or directed at government officials or school districts. I'm not sure. What I can say,
I think it is directed at me. So let me clarify it, Bella. My concern about this, as somebody who's covered the legislature on and off for 35 years, is it safe for people to be in that building? And was it safe for people to be in that building on Monday? Now, I have told you, and I'll say it again, I was not there, but what I saw and what we observed and what was covered, I think you can definitely question whether it was safe for people to be in that building on Monday. And that I find alarming.
And we should also mention as well, Bella, in responding to this, it is their right to show up. And as journalists,
the right to show up is not in question. The right to assembly is protected in the Constitution. I'm not disputing that. But I think there's also, with that right, there's also a responsibility to public safety and public health. And I think that was compromised on Monday. That's all.
And civil decorum, because what needs to happen at that state house needs to be safe, not only in a health manner, but the fact that more police had to be called in because protesters were unruly in terms of even breaking property, government property. I mean, it doesn't matter who the protesters are, what they're protesting about. We're talking about, civil decorum here as well.
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's move away from the legislative session. Bella, we appreciate you interacting with us, though. We really do. Let's talk about safely back to school. Kevin, we've had a lot of comments come up. I want to bring a few in. As schools have been starting up again, there have been so many different reports of how people are doing and what they're going through. Michelle is saying here that her kids are back to school in Boise, back online. Everything has been smooth so far. Had a delay in obtaining hotspots, otherwise perfect. Here's another one from Katie saying District 25 has started. I love the alternate day idea. I feel it's a logical compromise to try as best as possible to keep kiddos healthy, but also give them that face-to-face interaction for social networking as well. And Robert, I want to answer your question here. He says, is Meridian High School going to be completely online? And then says Mountain View. And again, that decision will be made by West Ada tonight. But some interesting thoughts there, Kevin. What have you been reporting at Idaho Education News? A number of stories. Nampa going back to school online this week, and you had a great profile piece on a 6th grade teacher. It was very sweet.
Right. So the start in Nampa yesterday, completely online, as the district announced they were going to do. This is a big day for the 2 largest districts in the state as well, because as you mentioned, the West Ada trustees are going to meet tonight. They're going to figure out what school looks like when the year begins on September 8th. The Boise School Board also meeting tonight, and they're going to decide what to do at this stage of the reopen, because as a very remote school district, yet Mackey is trying to continue with in-person learning. We will track what's happening in that district as well. And I think what Mackey illustrates is that you can have an outbreak of cases. You can have an increase in cases fairly quickly. Even in a very small county. I mean, Custer County is one of the most remote rural counties in the entire state, and yet you've seen a spike in cases even there.
As you reported there at Idaho Education News, 220 students in the Mackey School District altogether, and already 2 administrators, they haven't identified who they are, and a football player, which has put the football team on quarantine now, have come down with coronavirus. And what was interesting to me is that they don't have a metric per se for the school district to say, okay, what number do we get to where we go to online learning or a hybrid model? And I think that gets back to the fact of how difficult these decisions have been for school administrators, because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation when we're talking about COVID-19.
It's not one size fits all, and in the end, it's a decision that rests with the school administrators. Now, health districts do have a say in this, and they do have the ability to step in. But what the state has tried to do, and what you're seeing unfold, is the state is trying to make sure that this is a decision that rests with the local school boards, with the elected trustees at the local level.
Here's another comment here, Kevin, from Katie. She says, I have a 3rd grader in the Boise School District. I'm impressed with the teachers program so far this year. It's been a learning curve for both the teachers and students, I bet, right? Everyone is being understanding and helpful through these times. These young kids learning to use a keyboard and create text boxes boxed in programs for homework and assignments. It is definitely a change, but honestly, this is Katie's opinion, great skills to learn. They are happy with remote learning. And this goes back to what, Kevin, you and I have talked about all along all summer, which is that the fate of education through all of this will change, and quite possibly, hopefully, change for the better, because there are some students who will do just fine online, others who will not.
And what you're seeing in Boise is a good example, and something we should keep a close eye on as journalists as well as parents, is what does online learning look like this year as opposed to last year? Boise has really tried to refine and build upon its online process from the spring. This is supposed to feel like a different online setting for kids this year. So even for kids who are forced to be home for at least for the first couple of weeks of the school year, what the Boise district is trying to do is maintain some sense of what a normal school day would look like if kids were there face to face. So they're trying to make this a little bit more like a full learning day. And for parents and students in the online school, which is going to go at least through the semester, maybe through the school year, for those 4,600 kids, the idea is to have structure and day-to-day interaction between those teachers and those students. I think Boise, Dan Holler, spokesman for the district, put it the other day. He said the expectations are higher this year. That they're trying to do something more than what they were able to do on really short notice last spring. So I think that bears watching. What is the online learning experience like this time around as opposed to last time around? Because I think it's an oversimplification to say, well, it's just online learning. Online learning is evolving before our very eyes.
No doubt about it. And yet it is still incredibly difficult on parents. Laura, I'm hearing you. I work full time. My kindergartner is expected for Zoom meetings while I'm at work. He's in daycare. What am I supposed to do? And this is what the school districts are facing, especially with the elementary kids, K through 3. Kevin, you and I report all the time on all the research where kindergarten through 3rd grade, this is the crux of the learning education model for moving forward. And again, I feel for Laura because yes, her child may be in daycare, but that's a tough ask on daycares to make sure kids are now going to school as well.
Right, daycares with quite a few students. It's, Laura's in the middle of something we've talked about before, and you can't emphasize it too much, is that for some families and for some households, this transition to online learning is a lot tougher than it is for other households. For a parent who's working full time with a kindergartner, how do you do that juggle? I can't begin to answer that question. That is a very difficult situation, and my heart goes out to parents who are in this situation. There's no easy answer.
And then you move to like the teenagers, Kevin, and we've talked about fall sports and where fall sports stays right now, because again, this is left up to the district's decision. The state governing body for high school fall sports has said you can move forward with a safety plan, and it's a pretty extensive safety plan that they've put into place. But you talk about the mental well-being of students too. For so many student athletes, doing sports is what school is. I hate to say it that way, but it's what motivates them, right? And you didn't have to put sports in there. You could put any kind of extracurricular activity, choir or drama or band or whatever it might be. But let's take a look at fall sports in particular, as Idaho Ed News wrote about that. And it's kind of a mixed board. I mean, in fact, in Boise, they haven't really gone back into practice sessions fully.
They haven't gone back in Boise yet. In eastern Idaho, you've seen some games are already underway. So it's going to be mixed. I think it's going to be a mixed bag across the state. But you're right. What you said at the outset about the importance of athletics for kids, this is the most, this is what brings a lot of kids to school. What keeps kids engaged and gives kids a passion for being in school. This is the reward for hard work in school, and this is the thing that keeps kids engaged and energized. And you're right, whether it's sports, I was a choir kid in high school, and I still am a singer when we get to actually sing with choirs again and not have to worry about social distancing. That was what energized me as a student. That's what I looked forward to during the day, and that's what kept me grounded and what taught me a lot about being in groups and being part of a larger group, being part of something bigger than just me, much like sports. I mean, this is so important to kids, but right now it's so difficult to figure out what can you do safely and what can you provide safely. Again, really hard question to answer.
It is hard. Okay, Rebecca has a comment here, and I like this. I have kids in both the new online school and virtual school. Rebecca, I don't know what district you're in or what you're talking about there, but we have been so impressed. Everything has run so smoothly, and communication has been excellent. And I think there are a couple of pieces to going back to school safely. One of them, and we keep hearing it in the comments, so I'm referring to this now, is computers, how kids can use the computers, how the technology gets in the hands of the students, how the teachers can use the computers. So there's the technological aspect of this, but also communication with teachers, with administrators, because as we heard last spring, Kevin, so many parents were absolutely overwhelmed with communication, as in tens of emails a day from different teachers and different people trying to get this figured out. So those two aspects of online learning are going to have to be key. And I think it's interesting that Rebecca's talking about that.
Right. I think the communication is so important, and the technology, and let's kind of dovetail into that, because that's something I was writing about last week. Acquiring technology and getting technology into the hands of kids has been a real challenge. It's been a real challenge in the Boise district. It's a challenge in the West Ada district. We had a commenter before about the hotspots. Boise has been in this process of acquiring hotspots for students who cannot otherwise get online. They're also in this process of trying to get Chromebooks, little, smaller, personalized computing devices for students. They were expecting those devices, and we're talking about 13,000 devices. They were expecting those by June, then it turned into July, then it turned into early August. School year started without those devices, and what that meant is that for parents and for kids in the district, it meant cobbling together something else, going without a school issued device and doing something on a home device, which means you're sharing a home device with your parents, you're sharing your home device with a sibling, you don't have something that's personalized, you don't have something that operates under a common operating system. So from a technology troubleshooting standpoint, it's a little bit more complicated. Those devices, the district is really trying to scramble to get those devices into students' hands, because Boise wants to get into this one-to-one computing learning environment, which Nampa has, by the way. We talked about how Nampa started online, and how, if you go back to the spring, Nampa went online fairly quickly. Nampa has that one-to-one technology in place. They have devices in place for every student. So, the transition to online, at least from the technology standpoint, has been easier for Nampa. It's still a tough transition, but the availability of technology is not an issue in Nampa. It is still an issue in Boise. It is still an issue in West Ada, where they're expecting to receive, thousands of computers here in the next few days. It's a tough project, because you get all these devices, then you have to get them ready to get in the hands of students. Those IT workers in Boise and West Ada are going to have their hands full.
I can't even imagine. Talk about a whole new set of people. I had a conversation with a teacher yesterday after she got done with her first day of online. She's in a virtual situation now. She's chosen to do that, get out of the classroom and go into a virtual situation. And she admitted to me, even she had technical problems as a teacher, that her device wouldn't hook to the YouTube videos that she had worked hard all summer to try and put together. And so there's going to have to be, the word I keep using is a lot of grace, because not all of this is going to work perfectly, as we well know. This is an interesting comment from Mac, and I'm going to bring it up. Mac, I don't know what's going on here, but Mac saying that Southwest District Health is meeting right now. They haven't done much yet compared to Central District Health. So we're talking about the two health districts. Basically controls West Ada, Boise, CUNA schools, and then Southwest District Health, that's much more the Canyon County and further west school districts. He's asking, do you anticipate more restrictions in Valley View or other rural districts? And Kevin, I know you can't necessarily speak to that exactly, but what you can speak to, and what I'd like you to answer, is what is allowed by law when it comes to district health departments and what they can and cannot do in our schools.
Well, it's really an interesting process debate, and I think it's something that we're going to see continue going into the 2021 legislative session. I mean, there's a lot of pushback right now about what the health district's role is and what the health district's role ought to be. Going back to the spring, the health districts had a lot more of a defined role. They were essentially given very clear authority to decide whether a school could reopen. Now, this fall, it's a little bit less clear. And as we talked about before, the decision really falls to the school district first and foremost, but when you get right down to it, a health district can step in if a health district feels that a school district has gone too far, that they've gone rogue, that they're going on a reopening plan that is simply unsafe, that simply poses a health crisis. The health district can step in, but there are legislators who want to take away that authority entirely. That was a topic that some legislators wanted to see taken up this week in the special session. It's not on the list of topics that the governor is allowing discussion on, so it's not going to come up in the special session, but you can bet that this issue is going to come up when legislators return in January. And the governor as much as said it probably should come up in January. He said that there's some merit to having that debate, just not this week. So, what happens this week at Southwest District Health is just, one aspect of a debate that's going to continue for months to come.
Let's get to higher education. Boise State back in session starting yesterday, but it was pretty quiet on campus from some of the social media posts I saw, from a picture you took at Idaho Ed News. And as Dr. Marlene Tromp, the president at BSU, stated, she liked it that way. So right now, Boise State, if I'm correct, at this point is tracking about 7 cases of COVID-19, but they've definitely gone to this hybrid model of in-person and online classes in order to try and make school successful this year. I mean, that photo just kind of says it all to me, Kevin.
Yeah, and that's a photo from last week. So that was during the move-in, during the orientation process. But yes, it feels, like it's a little bit more of a quiet start at the universities. And, I think that's by design. I mean, at this point, the universities and the colleges are really trying to, keep large crowds from congregating, whether that's in a very crowded classroom or whether it's a party on campus or off campus. So there's been, you have a lot of safeguards that have been put into place that are designed to keep the colleges and universities open, and those are going to be put to the test. But really what's also going to be put to the test is, how do students respond and how do students behave on a college campus or a university campus in the middle of a pandemic? Do they comply with the mask mandates? And what we're hearing right now, what we're hearing from the universities and what we're hearing from students is a sense that, yes, there has been pretty good compliance with wearing masks and trying to maintain social distancing. But, does that continue 24/7? Does that continue outside of the school day? Does it continue on the weekends? And what we've seen in a lot of other instances on a lot of other campuses across the country is that that's where the problems arise. That's where you're having universities dealing with not just 7 coronavirus cases, as Boise State is tracking, not just a few dozen as have been counted so far at the University of Idaho, but hundreds of coronavirus cases within the span of a few days. That's where the trouble arises. So I think these next couple of weeks are going to be really critical for the Idaho colleges and universities. How do students make the transition into this new environment? Do they take it seriously? Do they take it to heart? Do they follow the guidelines? And do they follow really the message that the universities are sending, that if you value being here, if you value face-to-face instruction, if you want us to continue to be able to provide that, students, you have to do your part. You have to, comply with these these requirements and these guidelines. So a lot of it really does fall to the students. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this unfold.
The messaging was pretty straightforward, coming from University of Idaho President C. Scott Green. We showed a picture of him there from the article at Idaho Ed News. He got down to basics and basically issued a statement to students that said, this is up to you guys.
Yeah, he laid it on the line on Friday. The word that he had received and the university officials had received is that there were parties both on campus and off campus, which any other school year, parties on and off campus the week before fall semester. That's just returning to college. That's standard. Not in 2020, not in the middle of a pandemic. And yes, President Green was blunt about this and said, you students who are doing this are undermining a lot of work that's been done on this campus to try to reopen safely, and made it clear that if students don't do their part, the university can and will take steps to kick out students who are misbehaving. So it's a very different world right now for colleges and for college administrators and for college students. When I talked to a student leader at U of I on Monday for that story, and I asked him about that memo, he said, I understand where the president is coming from. It's probably a wake-up call to a lot of us, and it's probably what we need to do if we want to keep this campus open. But he said, look, there are some students who are going to look at this and say, this is an overreach. The president is, talking about off-campus events, and he's calling the police out to off-campus parties just because they're parties. And this is going to be a very interesting thing to watch. How does this reopen work at the universities? Not just the systems, but how do students respond? It's I was a college student once, and I wonder how today's college students respond to this, because I think 18 to 22-year-olds right now have to be a lot smarter than I had to be when I was 18 to 22. I mean, it's a lot more challenging world. It's a lot more challenging time. So it's going to be interesting for us who are out of that demographic to watch how students in that demographic respond to this. And
and yet we also know, Kevin, as has been reported by the medical community, that not that COVID-19 cannot hit this demographic, but for the most part, they are not as severely affected by COVID-19. So it's a whole mix of who's in control, who has the power and authority to do things. But ultimately, as you said, and we've seen across the country already with colleges and universities that have opened, you could look at Notre Dame, you could look at the University of Alabama talking today about having 560 cases.
Shocking. But, when I talked to Dr. Trump, President Marlene Trump on Monday, we talked a little bit about kind of how she sees this and how she sees, this demographic, this cohort, these 18 to 25 to 29-year-old college students. And her concern, and it's a really valid concern, and I didn't get into it in my story on Monday, but it's still stuck in my head, was she's concerned about students who are losing so much in their lives. So much has been taken away, so much has been, canceled over the past few months. That these students are, they're facing some really dark times, some really difficult, mental health challenges as a result of all of this. So being able to restore some sort of face-to-face learning, some sort of campus environment is really important, not just to these students from an education standpoint, but really from a mental health standpoint, from a social, a sense of social belonging. So she feels very passionately about, we need to try to provide something here. We need to, restore something that, while it's not completely what it was a year ago, it's at least heading back in the direction of some sort of a face-to-face environment where students can engage with each other and engage with their professors. She's very passionate about it. And when you hear her talking about it, this isn't just about keeping a school open. It's about providing sort of a pathway to students to, being back in a learning environment that is, that they need.
Well, and what they're used to as well. Wendy has the comment here. My children had their first day of classes at U of I and Garden Valley, both in person yesterday. And Wendy, I hope it continues to be that way for you. Plus, I love your Facebook little thing there. Looks like you might have had a graduate in 2020 who's now gone to the University of Idaho, I'm guessing. So congratulations, Mama. Well done.
That would be my guess.
And hopefully that just continues. Kevin, let's get back to a few other comments in a moment about K through 12 education and how people are handling that. But first, we would be remiss if we didn't talk quickly about the fact that today is election day for two local school districts who are trying to pass some levies. So let's talk about West Ada and Middleton. Fact of the matter is that this is quote unquote round 2 for these schools, trying to make sure that they can get these levies not only passed, but can move forward with how much money is connected to them.
Right. So West Ada, two-year, $28 million supplemental levy on the ballot today. Middleton, two-year, $3 million supplemental levy. In both cases, the districts are saying that this money is needed to, head off deeper cuts in their budget. West Ada, this levy accounts for about 5% of their annual budget, and it helps keep staff positions on the job, keep staff on the job. It helps try to mitigate the increase in class sizes. But as you said, in both cases, voters turned these levies down in the spring. So here we are again. Both of these levies will require a simple majority to pass.
And we'll be covering the election results both at idahonews6.com and at idahoednews.org. Cecilia says here, my boyfriend's 2 sons, 6th grader and kindergartner, started online, but after the first 2 weeks of full online, I'm hoping that NAMPA will enter into the face-to-face component. So many parents and caregivers are having to deal with work and homeschool in this way, a whole new way. And what I want to take from this with you, Kevin, too, is that there's no clear-cut direction for how school districts and or health departments at this point will continue down the road of schooling, meaning things can change. Just because somebody started in an online situation, perhaps in Nampa or in Boise, doesn't mean that they will continue down that direction for an entire school year, or let alone even an entire quarter.
Yeah, I think parents, educators are going to have to be very flexible this school year, because what you have going on right now in August may not be what's going on in September. It may change several times over the course of the year.
Well, we appreciate everybody who's been a part of our comments. We hear you. We know that this is a tough time. We get it. And so that's why we're here with Making the Grade every week, to try and bring you the latest, best information when it comes to your child's education. Kevin, I really appreciate all the insight. And in case people haven't joined us ever, do I need to explain how we end Making the Grade? Because it is random. I mean, it's about your feet.
Yeah, it's about, right. It's something completely different than what we've been talking about the past 38 minutes or so.
Something to make us laugh, because no matter what's happening, no matter what your thoughts are about education, everybody just needs to have a laugh. And we do that by looking at Kevin's socks, because he's very purposeful about his socks. And I just like making him do calisthenics in his office.
I don't know, these are just kind of metal. I mean, these are pretty intense.
Wow.
Yeah, let's get in there.
Wolf?
Wolf. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what schools are wolves out there. There's got to have been a wolf for some schools.
There gotta be some wolves. There gotta be some wolf mascots in Idaho. I don't know off the top of my head.
What were your mascots?
We were Bruins.
Bruins. Yep, we were the Bears.
Can't really go wrong with Bears and Bruins. They're pretty standard fare mascots. But...
Or wolf socks. For that matter.
Yes.
Kevin, we appreciate all that you are doing at Idaho Education News. Continue to stay safe. We will look for updates all day on what's happening with the special legislative session. And of course, people can tune in tonight to Idaho News 6, where we will be covering it as well. Stay safe, my friend, and thanks for being here for Making the Grade.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks all.